Hey GENEXT audience, my name is Andy of the MCA Youth Committee. Thank you guys so much for tuning into tonight's session. I would like to pay respects to the traditional owners of the Biennale land. In a few minutes, we'll be interviewing none other than the MCA's Assistant Curator, Stephanie Berlangieri. We'll be talking about her life as an Assistant Curator at the MCA. Oh, hey Stephanie.
Keep going.
You mind if I quickly finish off this intro?
No problem.
What the art world means to her and how she's gone to where she's currently at. For those out there who are curious in pursuing something similar or related. It was not obvious enough. I'm actually really excited. I got tons of questions to ask you, Stephanie. And by the way, audiences, you are also able to ask questions. Just send them through the comments. Stephanie, is it all right if we just quickly jump into it?
Yeah, no worries. Let's go.
All right. We'll start off with the first question then. How have you stayed connected to the art world throughout these times, like in quarantine and all that?
That's a really good question. I think actually the question should maybe be rephrased to say, how haven't I stayed connected to the art world? There have been so many incredible online programs and initiatives that have come out of this situation in the art world. And particularly, I found it really interesting to see how, because we can't physically be visiting exhibitions, how museums have adapted their content to the online space. Some more successful than others. So I think the Biennale, for example, has done really well in this context with the kinds of programs they've had online. So instead of kind of creating these online viewing rooms, which a lot of organizations have kind of been quick to do, which is great, but sometimes it's a little bit static and you can't really physically replicate. You can't really replicate the physical experience of being in a museum. So the Biennale, they've been really using the digital formats for what it's actually best for. So there have been podcasts that they've hosted and Spotify playlists that they've made available, and interviews and things like that. So I think that's been really great, and that's a really great example. And also another thing that I've found really useful to keep tabs on is the Institute of Contemporary Art in London, their daily email that they send to their mailing list. I think personally that it's been quite overwhelming with all the content that's available online, and the ICA's email for me has kind of been a way of filtering out what's great and what I actually want to spend my time engaging with.
Yeah. Right. That's very interesting. I have another question for you.
Sure.
In pursuing your career as a curator, did you have like any second thoughts or doubts, especially accounting for the stigma around like pursuing art and how it's like unstable or like risky?
Yeah, art definitely has that kind of reputation as being a risky choice in terms of career. But I actually first wanted to be an architect, believe it or not. So it's not too crazy from going from an architect to curator, but art was always at the back of my mind as what I would do if architecture didn't work out. And so I studied architecture for a couple of years. Didn't work out for me, and I ended up taking 6 months off to kind of decide where I was going to go next. And so in that time, I did a lot of volunteering at artist-run spaces, and I kind of thought, I like this. This is good. And I went back to uni and studied art history and literature, which I
got a new question. How long did that course take?
Architecture or the art history?
The art one.
So that was a Bachelor of Arts. So that was a 3-year undergrad degree.
All right.
And a lot of people go and do masters after that, specifically in curating, but that wasn't something I actually did. I only did the 3-year Bachelor of Arts, and then did a lot of interning and volunteering alongside that, and took some time off and ended up getting a job at the Biennale of Sydney, which was fantastic, and then on MCA. So I didn't have to go on with further study in the end.
Right. So yeah, interesting. Um, although you are curator, do you like create any artworks of your own, like perhaps for like leisure, or did you like ever think about being an artist?
Um, I think when I was at university, I definitely thought about being an artist in a very cursory way. It was never very serious,
Right.
but it was an idea that I had in the back of my mind. But in the end, I don't think it really corresponded with my personality because I'm not
Right.
very good with freedom, I'd say. I'd say when I'm a curator, it gives me it's a way of being creative that's within a specific framework. So, I'm managing exhibitions and working with artists, and there's a specific role
Mhm.
that I have to fill. So I find that for me, that's why I've been attracted to curating, um, and also writing as well. Writing I find is
All
probably
right.
the most comfortable way of articulating myself, and that's a big part of
Mhm.
my role. So rather than being someone who expresses themselves visually, I think writing is probably, the most comfortable format for me to express myself in. In terms of whether I make stuff in my own time, not usually, but
Mhm.
since I've been in isolation, I've actually become quite obsessed with cross stitching, which I
All
know
right.
isn't, it's not particularly highbrow. Um, but I found it really fun and meditative. And again, there's like a sense of sort of control and sort of freedom within the constraints of that kind of way of working, because there is a certain way to stitch and there's a pattern, and then I work to that pattern. Um, yeah, so that's what I've been doing at the moment.
All right. Sounds fun.
Yeah, it has been.
Um, what exhibitions have you recently participated in? So sorry.
Sorry, what was that?
I'll repeat the question.
Yep,
What exhibitions have you recently participated in?
sure. So the most recent shows I've worked on have been Janet Lawrence After Nature, which was in 2018,
Yeah.
and that was curated by Rachel Kent, and that
Right.
was a mid-career survey show that covered over 30 years of Janet Lawrence's practice.
All right.
Um, yeah, and also Primavera 2019, which was curated by the Sydney-based artist Mitch Cairns, which was a fantastic experience as well. And
Mm-hmm.
also, most recently, Sean Gladwell as well, Pacific Undertow, which
All
was
right.
curated by Natasha Bullock and Blair French. And
Mm-hmm.
again, that was a major mid-career survey for Sean Gladwell. So that was covering around 20 years of his practice.
Right. That's pretty convenient because the next question is asking how like the creating process of Sean Gladwell's Pacific Undertow was like.
So the creative process for Sean Gladwell. Um, that show had actually a couple of challenges that made it different to other exhibitions that I've worked on, in that
Right.
um, so Sean's, incredibly well known for his video work, and the curators and himself were really interested in kind of not following the way that a lot of other video shows go, in terms of creating a series of black boxes in which you view the work. So they were really interested in having like a minimal open space where the works are presented in dialogue with one another. So, as I'm sure you're aware,
Mm-hmm.
you don't have walls around
Yeah.
video works. A lot of the sound
Yeah.
will bleed the other spaces. But most of Sean Gladwell's works have these really beautiful ambient soundtracks that are mostly created in collaboration with the sound artist Kazumichi Grime, who's also based in Sydney. And
Mm-hmm.
so to kind of work with this ambient soundscape that was going to be going through all the exhibition spaces, we worked with Kazumichi Grime, and he equalized the sound of all the video works in the show so that they were worked in, relative to one another. And so there was this sort
Right.
of background ambient soundscape that you experienced as you were walking through the space. So I found that a really interesting challenge. Um, also, I think another big one was working with technology on that show. So
Yeah.
we had 2 works using augmented reality, and one
Right.
that was in virtual reality.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we
I was talking about that.
Yep. And we also even had a Minecraft map that we made to accompany the show. Not sure if you had a go on that, but
No, I
that
haven't.
was for me. I didn't know anything about Minecraft, but I
Mhm.
also didn't know anything about AR and VR. So for me, it was quite difficult to visualize the end product of what these works were going to look
Right.
like, because I worked in these formats before. And so trying to sort of understand the artist's ideas and also how they were going to be executed was very difficult. But we
Yeah.
worked with a developer who has worked really closely with Sean Gladwell in the past on other
Mhm.
projects. And he was really great at communicating how it would look and sort of, explaining it in layman's terms.
Right.
Um, and the technology was changing as we were producing the show. So we were,
Mhm.
the show had been worked on for a couple of years. So, there was a different type of VR headset that we used at the end of the show than what was considered,
Right.
planning the show back at the beginning. So for me, that was, a great way to learn about how to use emerging technologies, not just AR and VR, but how to take that same approach to other technologies that are emerging.
Right. It's quite odd because like in the contemporary world, right, like all this technology is like changing so quickly. So it's kind of odd how that like translates into an artistic kind of like medium,
Yeah, it
which is
is.
like I find what, yeah.
It's like, there are a lot of artworks decades ago that were, video works that were on VHS and
Yeah.
CD-ROMs and all these formats that are kind of slowly, no one uses them anymore. And it's interesting, that digitization process, and how, we're archiving these kinds of works, and how that will happen with VR or AR later, in the future.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So what is your opinion on like contemporary art and like the influence of technology?
Okay, that's a big question.
Yeah.
But a good one. Well, I mean, like any other kind of developments, historically, the new digital technologies are changing the way that art is made. It's,
Hmm.
it's another medium, another format that, artists are able to use, whether that's, AR or VR, or the use of now computer algorithms, which is becoming
Hmm.
commonplace as well. Um, so just like, in the Impressionist movement, when paint tubes were invented, that allowed
Yeah.
Impressionism to actually take place, when artists could now travel and paint outdoors.
Mm.
So it's changing the way artists create art, but then it's also changing the way that art is received.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
for example, at the MCA, I'm not sure if you use the app, the MCA.art app, but you can actually now scan artworks that are in the collection, and artworks in particular
Oh.
shows, using AR.
Mm.
Scan these works on your phone, and you can read about, the work, listen to audio clips, watch little
Mhm.
videos. So it's kind of a way of allowing the audience to sort of engage, well, to choose how much they want to engage in the work, and how they want to engage in the work.
Right. Um, I've seen how like the MCA like on the website have like VR kind of tours of the works, and I thought that's pretty interesting as well.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so our website is kind of geared towards encouraging the use of different technologies. So, I mean, even
Mm.
with the Sean Gladwell exhibition, one really challenging part of it was thinking about how we were going to communicate with audiences about actually, using the AR and VR elements of the show, or accessing those elements. Um, so, not everyone has an iPhone on them. So one way that we did that was by having, most people do, but not all people, was by having hosts near some of the AR works with iPads. So if they didn't have an iPhone, then
Mm-hmm.
the host could enable them to access the work. Because you might have remembered one of the works was actually presented on a blank wall. So
Oh,
the
right.
video, the video work Tangara by Sean Gladwell, you could only actually access that through your phone.
Oh, what?
So
Last.
it's projected on the wall through your phone. So a lot of
Mm-hmm.
people would just go past because they wouldn't know that work was available. But we had symbols on the walls that were directing people to that work, and also the host nearby who was able to chat to people and let them know that it was there. Because it's kind of like training people to engage with art in a new way.
Yeah. So despite the postponed Biennale, right? Were there like any artworks that like made you feel like wow, or like you were so like taken back? Because I recently saw Aziz Hazara's Bao Echo, and I thought that work was like so good. I was so obsessed with it.
Yeah, that is definitely a standout at the MCA's presentation of the Biennale, with those 5 screens that surround you. It's really an
Yeah.
immersive, overwhelming piece. Yeah. Well, one of my favorite works is probably by the artist Jess Fan. He's an artist who is currently working in New York,
Oh, right.
and yeah, his work. I mean, he has a larger presentation, but my favorite work is probably the video work Xenophoria.
Mm.
And
Do you mind explaining like what it's about?
yeah, of course. So the title is drawing on the name of a type of underwater carrier shell that has the Latin name Xenophora pallidae. So
Right.
this carrier shell, which is actually in the video work, it calcifies like objects in the sea and sifts through them, and then those objects become part of its shell. So it takes in these objects around them, which are part of its spine. So this shell, this creature is like this carrier shell is sort of like an antidote to, a similar word, xenophobia, which is a fear of the other, like a rejection of the other. So this shell is taking in the other rather than rejecting it. So it's kind of this metaphor for like racial antagonism and xenophobia. And I just found that such an interesting way of using like a natural phenomenon to talk about, larger, societal issues.
Would you say like in the way that it utilizes like seashells and all that, would you say like it's similar to Janet Lawrence's work?
It's definitely similar in the materials it uses, but the intention is quite different in that, Janet Lawrence is very much concerned with environmentalism and, transmitting the message about, looking after and caring for our environment and having empathy with our environment. Whereas Jess Fan's work is speaking about how we should treat each other. But they're both coming back to nature as a way of doing that.
Right. Okay. You're also like a curatorial assistant of the 21st Biennale of Sydney. And I was curious as to like what it was like working on such a large scale exhibition.
Yeah, so before I was at the MCA, I was working at the Biennale of Sydney. And I was curatorial assistant with the artistic director, Mami Kateoka, on that exhibition. And the Biennale was such an incredible experience for me, being part of something that is so big and that takes over the entire city. It's just, you really feel like you're part of something larger. And there's no way to learn better in terms of how to produce exhibitions than by, working with, I think it was 69 different artists.
Oh, right.
And executing 69 individual projects, a lot of them which were new commissions. So yeah, the Biennale, for me, working for the Biennale was great. And then also this time around for the 22nd Biennale, I worked at the MCA. So being able to work with that organization again on what is like such an important exhibition this time around, particularly because it is foregrounding like the stories of First Nations people, which have often been relegated to the side. And so this particular Biennale has felt really momentous and really significant for Sydney.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my school's been like conducting like assessments based on like the Biennale and all that, so I was kind of curious.
Oh, great! Have you been?
Yeah.
Have you had a chance to visit the Biennale before it closed?
No, I didn't get a chance to, not really, unfortunately.
It was only open for 10 days, so that's understandable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going up again, which is very exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the audiences out there who are like interested in art, including myself, what advice would you have for young people wanting to pursue a career as a curator? Like, or if is there something you wish you knew before you pursued such a career?
I think the best advice I can probably give is to just do it. So at whatever scale, you can, undertake projects with, your friends or with, smaller groups locally in your area. See what's available. Look at the galleries that are in your local area as well. Because I think I was a little bit afraid to sort of put myself out there at the beginning, and I studied really hard, and I wrote lots of essays, and I did see a lot of shows, but it took me a while to actually get out there and talk to people and start putting on my own shows. So if I could give myself advice for when I was younger, it would be just do it. You'll work it out as you go.
Right. Okay. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and chatting with me tonight. I just wanted to quickly check if there's like any remaining questions before like we head off.
Sure.
There's quite a lot of comments. He's from Sully Riddles. Do you have an artist you would like to curate or like for specifically?
An artist I would like to curate. That's a tough one. Locally, I'm very, very keen on Giselle Stanborough's work at the moment. So Giselle Stanborough is a Sydney-based artist. She actually works at the MCA as well.
All right.
Her work is really it's really embedded in technology and surveillance. And she actually opened a major exhibition at Carriage Works just when the lockdown took place, and so her work was able to be seen by anyone, which is just such a shame. And yeah, her new exhibition, Synopticon, which is called, is looking at this new form of surveillance that has emerged in the digital era, and how we're kind of no longer being watched, but we're all watching each other as well, whether that's through social media or through biometrics, or through consumer surveillance. So, I mean, her work engages with so many things that I'm personally interested in as a curator. So she would definitely be at the top of my list.
Right. Okay. It's very interesting. We have more time for one more question.
One more.
From Richie Snitch. Like, yeah. Do you have any upcoming like exhibitions that you're going to be featuring in?
Not that I'm going to be featuring in, but I am working on a few at the MCA.
All right.
So my next show that I'm working on is what would have been the Summer International Art Series, but will no longer be presented in summer. That is Doug Aitken's exhibition. So he's an American artist who is known for his video work and large installations. So his work is also kind of dealing a lot with technology and technological developments, and also the environment and cityscapes, and particularly a kind of American character as well that is really embedded in his work. So I'm really excited about that one.
Right. Well, that's it for tonight. Thank you again, Stephanie, so much for your time. And to our GENEXT audience for tuning into tonight's interview. That's amazing, Stephanie.
Bye-bye.